hour-long energy drink for your mind. 3 electrifying hosts and an incredibly inspiring guest every Friday at noon. I'm your host, Rachelle Henry.
I'm Sasha Kerbel.
And I'm Rico E Anderson.
Prepare yourself for 60 minutes of high-voltage conversation.
And get ready to supercharge your brain.
Because it's now time for the Lightning Hour.
She's a professional dancer, choreographer. She's been teaching dance for 20 years in the United States and internationally in Portugal, South Africa, and Uganda. She's a founder and president of Tap Uganda, an arts education program providing youth in Kampala and surrounding areas with tap education, resources, and skills to eventually find work and thrive. 2 years ago, she presented on intercultural methods of dance teaching at Dance and the Child International in Adelaide, Australia.
1, 2, 3,
Ladies and gentlemen, Pam Vlach, a dancer, choreographer, dance teacher, and the founder of Tap Uganda Arts Education Program. She's with us today, as you noticed. Hi, Pam. So nice to have you with us.
Hi, thank you so much. It's so nice to be here.
How did it all start for you? How did you start dancing?
I was 3 years old. My mom told me that when I was 2, I went to her and I said I wanted to take dance lessons. And she said, well, you need to wait until you're 3. Because, you know, when you're 3, you're a big kid, you know? So she said, you need to wait until you're 3. And she told me that when I was 3, I came back to her and said, I'm 3 now and I still want to take dance lessons. And so she started me, you know, in just like a combination class on the weekends, like a tap ballet class in Portland on Saturday mornings, I think. And then it took off from there. You know, I just kept dancing and I really haven't stopped. Really, since I was 3 years old, I've just sort of kept doing it. You know, I started teaching dance about 20 years ago. And that's something that's been important to me is how do we allow each child, each adult to really find joy through movement, you know, and it doesn't necessarily have to be technical. It can just be, you know, I'm moving and I'm finding joy and it feels great.
When you first started in competitive dancing, can you remember what some of your goals were?
I think I fell into competitive dancing because I was at a studio, you know, that did competitive dancing. I don't know that at that point when I was really young that I had goals other than like, I just loved it. I think it's just always been a part of who I was. And then as I got older, I knew I wanted to end up in New York. You know, when I was like in my older teenage years, 15, 16, 17, I felt this draw toward New York. And then it didn't work out in my college years to go to New York. I was in Seattle at University of Washington for my undergraduate. And then I met my husband. I was about 24 and he was living in New York. I was living on the West Coast. We were cast in a dance show together. And it was sort of making its West Coast debut. It had already been done in New York. And I was hired to replace a New York dancer who couldn't make it. And Eric, my husband, and I were partnering. So we met through this dance show together. And then about 6 months later, I was like, you know, I'm never going to be that woman who like moves for a guy to another city, right? And then I was totally that person, you know, that like moved for a guy, you know, oh man, but it did work out, you know, here we are, we're still together. So, and we have a baby boy. Yeah. So it's, you know, it's amazing how life sort of takes you on those paths.
So now you end up going to New York. We all have challenges that happen throughout our rise to professions that we're in. What were some of the challenges that you encountered?
You know, one of the big challenges for me in New York at the beginning was just making enough money to survive. I moved here really without much savings, which was probably not the smartest move. But, when you're 24, you're kind of just like, it'll all work out,
Right.
no
Yeah.
problem, right? So I moved here, and I was lucky enough. I have one family member on the East Coast, and that's my cousin who lives out in Queens. And he very kindly let me move in with them for a little bit, and I was commuting into the city. And I got a job as a hostess at a little Greek diner on the Upper East Side, and it was paying like, I think $8 an hour or something, like way below I think it was probably below minimum wage, and they were paying me they would give me cash every Friday in a rubber band. Like that was like how I would collect my pay. So, I was working 50, 60-hour weeks as a hostess. And, as a hostess, you don't get tipped, right? You're not a server. So it was not a lot of money for New York City, especially like even at that time to rent a room, it was like $1,000 a month just to have a room in an apartment somewhere. So I was working as a hostess, and I was getting dance classes by working for my dance teachers. So I would do like administrative work for my dance teachers, and I would trade for classes. So one of my dearest friends and one of the teachers that I just admire so much, Barbara Duffy, who's a tap teacher here in New York City and a tap star. I mean, I could like go off about her resume; it's endless. But she allowed me to work for her in exchange for classes, and that was one of the biggest gifts when I moved to New York. But I remember I had been in New York for about 3 months. I was still just getting finished working at the diner and just transitioning into having dance teaching work. I hadn't gotten my first paycheck yet. And I realized that my checking account was empty, my savings account was empty, and like my credit card was maxed. Like there was like nowhere to go, and I didn't have dinner, and I had no money for food. And of course, like you don't want to call home, right? Because it's like, could I have probably called home and like mom and dad would have sent me $50 to like get me through, the week? Yes. But like, I didn't want to call home because I felt like I need to do this myself. And I was embarrassed that like I hadn't, like made it enough to like actually be able to afford food. So, luckily I went home that night to my apartment. I was, living in an apartment by then. I had a little room and I was living with a family. And luckily they had like some leftovers from their dinner. And I was just like, I told them, I was like, you know what, like I'm out of food and I'm out of money. So, and they were so kind, and they were like, here you go. And it's fine. We get it. They were both actors. So they were like, we understand. And, and then I just moved on from there. But that first year was just really challenging, just trying to make ends meet and trying to also practice your craft, right? Which I'm sure all of you can appreciate being artists yourself. It's like, it's the fine balance, right? Between making enough money and working, and then also like practicing your acting or practicing your dancing and staying true to that. So I don't know all of your personal journeys, but what I do know is, if you're still standing in the arts, you've survived some things.
When people ask, what is success? It's a very personal thing. It's whatever you want to define it as. Because for you, one thing might be something that you've always wanted to achieve. It's a milestone you've been wanting to hit. And it may not be the same as like someone else that that's in the same career path. They're doing a different thing. But every person's journey is different. We're all unique. And it's just a part of us. It's right. We get to define what is successful for ourselves.
For me, I really wanted to have a little one. So for me, my goals have shifted over the years, and dance is still a huge part of my life and always will be. But, my son has become, a huge mark of success for me. The fact that, we were able to have a baby and we did it, and here he is and he's wonderful, so it's, so our ideas, I can really relate to what you're saying, Rachelle, because our ideas of success shift too, right? As we get on in life and we get to different chapters.
Exactly. And your son is so cute. I melt every single time I see pictures of him. So when you were talking about teaching, I'm curious how you got started teaching, because I remember, of course, like when you were teaching me and all that, but I'm curious like how you got started down that path.
Very, very young when I started being interested in teaching. I think there was always a part of me that really enjoyed mentoring. I think I really liked sort of guiding the younger dancers along. So I started asking my dance teachers when I was a teenager, can I assist? Can I assist you when you're teaching? And, that's helpful for a dance teacher. It's helpful for me when I have students ask me if they can assist, because sometimes you have 16 kids in a room and you're like, if you can have somebody who wrangles a little bit and helps demonstrate things, it can be really helpful. So I started assisting when I was, I think, 14 or 15. And then by the time I was 16, my home studio gave me my first classes on my own, teaching on Saturday mornings. And I had like 16 kids. And I think one of the classes was like 3 to 4-year-olds, and the other one was 4 to 5-year-olds. And they were tap, jazz, acro, which is like acrobatic combinations. And it was an hour. So you would have basically 20 minutes in each dance style. That sounds very doable until you have 16 4-year-olds in a room. It's a lot harder than you think it would be. But I got some really excellent training that way, because I was just sort of thrown in there after a couple of years of assisting. And I started teaching my own classes. I think I was doing it for, $12 an hour. And I loved it. I loved it. There was nowhere else I wanted to be on Saturday mornings. I was like this dorky high school kid who was like, Saturday mornings, I'll get up early and teach dance, like who was I? But I loved it. And then when I was 17, I graduated from high school. I was a young senior, so I was still 17 when I graduated. Moved to Seattle for college, and got a job teaching dance immediately in Seattle. And before I knew it, I was teaching at like 4 or 5 studios in Seattle, and did that throughout my college years. And then I did it for another 3 or 4 years after that. And then I moved to New York.
So you founded a program called Tap Uganda, which is an art program that teaches kids in Uganda how to do tap. Could you tell us a little bit about how you got started with that idea, and why did you pick Uganda?
Yeah, so I was on a study abroad program actually to Uganda as part of my graduate program. So I did my master's in dance education at New York University. And I had brought some tap shoes because the director of the program had said, hey, you know what? If you have a specialization, if you have something you like to teach, bring whatever you need to teach it. So I was like, well, there's probably not a lot of tap shoes. I don't know, maybe there are, but maybe there aren't. So I'll bring tap shoes, So I brought tap shoes and managed to teach some tap while I was in Uganda during that study abroad. And after I taught, a bunch of the kids asked, hey, could you send videos and keep teaching us through videos? And I was like, I guess I was having trouble kind of thinking out of the box. I mean, now that we're all on Zoom, I probably wouldn't have so much trouble envisioning that, but this was in 2017 and that just hadn't really occurred to me yet. And I thought, okay, well, let's try it. Sure, I'll make some videos at home when I get back to New York, and I'll go into a studio, and then I'll send you guys videos, and we'll just see what happens. So I did that, and they started sending response videos, and the kids had learned like everything that I sent. And I was like, wow, they're liking this. I mean, they're having fun with it. That was how it began. And from the first moments of the program, it was very clear that, in many ways, the kids' desire was driving it.
In the videos that you post of them, you can tell that they are so passionate, that they love it, that they get so excited when they're doing tap. It's just so beautiful to see. And they're really talented. Yeah,
I mean, so talented. So talented. I've never taught in my 20-year career. I've never taught another group of kids that picked up tap so quickly. And what I've learned, that I didn't know when I started out. Well, I knew cognitively the history of tap, which is that it does come from Africa. That's the root of tap, is that it comes from Africa. I knew that. I didn't understand it until I was learning the traditional dances, and I understood the physical parallels between the traditional dances in Uganda and tap dance. And then when I started teaching in Uganda, I started being able to make comparisons as I was teaching the kids. So I could say something like, in this traditional dance, I've seen this. Is this kind of similar to what this is in tap? And then the kids were making connections between the two. And so that's been a really, it's just been this amazing learning process for me, really embodying like from traditional dances in Uganda to tap and what that arc was, and to see like this is where it started and now this is where it was as an American art form, and that was the journey, and that's been really amazing because I knew it but like I had never experienced it.
I think there's an evolution in general of dance and where it comes from. I mean, you even look at twerking. When a lot of people were saying, oh, Miley Cyrus and twerking, she introduced it all. And it's like, actually, it's been around a lot longer. She just took something that, because of her platform, brought it out in the forefront.
Right. Well, and that makes a really good point, right, about some of these dance forms that did come from Africa, and appropriation, right, and how we don't give, necessarily appropriate credit to, to where it came from, and that's a hugely important part of tap history, is to understand, what the roots were, and then to also, really give credit to our Black American founders of tap dance, because that was the community where it was happening. White people took it on eventually, and then sort of made it their own in different ways, but it wasn't white people's first.
And also, just one last thing, I look at like artists like the Nicholas brothers, who were just tap gods, and you look at what they've done and their contribution. But unfortunately, when you think of tap dancers and dancers of excuse me, of vintage classic Hollywood, you don't think of them. You think of Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly and Ginger Rogers, who are all wonderful tap dancers and dancers in their own respect. But
they weren't doing it first.
They weren't doing it first, and they weren't doing it like the Nicholas brothers.
Yes. And the other example I give often when I'm teaching tap is like, for the Shirley Temple movies, who do we know about? Right? We know about Shirley Temple, but there was Bilbo Jangles Robinson, right? Who was a star, right? Like it was, it was his birthday that we celebrate National Tap Dance Day, and he taught her. He was on set teaching her. I mean, he was really the star of that whole series, and yet so many people don't know his name.
What's the circumstances of the kids you work with?
So we have a lot of different situations. So I'm working dominantly in 4 centers and or schools right now. So one is a school for little guys. For like, I think they're probably up to, I was working with ages, I think like 5, 6, and 7 when I was there last. They do have some classes with older kids there, but I was working with the younger group. It's an actual school that families send their children to. So those kids are actually able to go to school, and the families are sending them. I work at another one that's also a school that's a similar situation. And then I have 2 centers that I work at. In Uganda, they're called children's centers. And that has a population of sort of various situations. You have kids that don't have families. You have kids that have families who can't care for them. And in a few cases, in one of the centers, there are kids who do live with their families, but they go to the center for free programming for dance and music. So dance and music are an enormous part of the culture in Uganda. And many of the kids grow up learning how to play instruments, learning traditional dances, and they have wonderful teachers. And so a lot of them are able to do that through these centers that offer free programming.
Was there a specific moment from that first class that you carry in your heart forever?
I was very surprised because, again, I've learned a lot, but I hadn't taught them previously to that first class. So there was a lot I didn't know. There was a lot I didn't know about the culture. There was a lot that I didn't understand about the situation. There was a lot that I didn't know about the connections between tap and their traditional dances. So when I first started, I didn't expect that they were going to catch on as quickly as they did. And by the end of the first class, they were already doing counterpoints, which is like, you know, I had 3 groups and they were all doing something different rhythmically and staying together musically. And they were doing it with tap steps that they had just learned that day. So they were already able to plug musically into like these tap steps. I'm like getting chills talking about it because they're so talented. They had already been able to plug musically into tap steps that they had learned within the hour. And I was blown away. I was just blown away. I was like,
Lunges.
yeah, I was just like, I've never seen this with tap dance before, you know? And so, you know, that really set off, a lot of the joy for me in terms of just the teaching, right? Like I've always gotten a lot of joy from teaching, but I think it's partly what's brought me back to Uganda again and again, because the teaching is just so gratifying. You know, it's like, it's so fun to teach these kids and these amazing dancers. I shouldn't even call them kids. I should give them, you know, correct credit and call them dancers. It's amazing to teach these dancers because they are just truly phenomenal.
Okay, so we're going to take a look at a video, and it's going to give us an idea of what the class of Tap Uganda and the program itself looks like.
It's obvious that everybody's having such a good time there.
Was it easy to put together a team of volunteers for the program, and how many were there when you were able to do so?
Well, I'm a one-hit wonder. I don't have help. So the deal is that I have colleagues on the Uganda side who work for the program, who are, and that's you know, that's been a really important component, because you know, I'm only there, you know, once or twice a year. I have some amazing colleagues there who are some of the best dance educators I've ever known, and they can kind of, you know, look out for the kids when I'm not there, and you know, and all of that, and you know, and the kids are in their normal lives. I mean, I'm the visitor, you know what I mean? Like, I just come in every once in a while and do my thing, and then I am in touch with them when I'm not in Uganda. So, you know, one of the things I was speaking earlier about, the kids really driving the program and what happens in the program. And one of the things that has happened is that the kids a few of them expressed an interest in teaching tap. And I think one specifically already had an opportunity lined up to teach tap after a couple of years of being involved with Tap Uganda. And so what we started doing is I started doing video chats with the kids. I was here in New York, they were in Uganda, with lesson planning and teaching skills. And then when I went back to Uganda, after we had sort of begun that process, we decided to like ask, you know, I mean, do you guys want like a, you know, like a pedagogy class? Like, do you want a class about, you know, specifically how to teach tap? And they were like, yeah, we want to do it. And sure enough, like 25 kids showed up for this class to learn how to teach tap. So, you know, that was also, you know, really good for me because I had to really think about like, how do I teach tap, you know, and how to organize that for them. And, you know, and just to break down, like, you know, this is how you scaffold, you know, build on skills. This is how you, you know, this is a way to structure a class that is effective, but also appropriate for Uganda, because we can't view teaching in the same way, right? Like, I have to be very aware of the fact that how I teach in the United States, some of the skills carry over because, you know, teaching is teaching, but there's also a lot that's different. about how I teach in Uganda. The kids, that's sort of also where my Ugandan colleagues come in, because the kids have also done a lot of kind of apprenticing with my Ugandan colleagues, and they've learned how to teach dance also through that lens, which is equally, if not more important, than just learning how to sort of scaffold the tap skills. From me. So it's kind of just this constant in and out. We've had about 4 or 5 kids from the program teach tap now in various parts of Kampala and outside of Kampala. So that's been really cool to watch. And a couple of them have sort of continued teaching in my absence at some of the centers where I'm not right now because I'm not in Uganda. A couple of those dancers have now kind of taken up the reins and are now teaching at those centers. And then when next time I get there, I'll pick it up again.
So are any of them ever going to come over and teach in the US? Because sign me up.
It is like my dream, to get a bunch of the dancers over here. Last year, Tap Uganda did fly in one of my colleagues. Her name is Grace E Banda. And she is a brilliant dance educator. I watch her sometimes teach and I'm just it's just it's a master class in teaching. This woman is like a child whisperer, it's amazing. And I Tap Uganda flew her over to teach traditional dances here in New York City to some of the kids in New York City. And that really influenced the trajectory of the program, that trip, because what happened was in her teaching of traditional dances, we always started, and again, we didn't know what was going to happen. This is like action research, right? You try something and you're like, I don't know, I have this idea, let's do it. So she came, we did a baseline assessment in several communities in New York. So not just one school, it was several communities. What do you know about Uganda? What are your impressions of Uganda? And what we found across communities in New York, that the American kids had a very primitive view of what Uganda is and who the people in Uganda are. So some of the things that we heard the kids say, and I'm not saying this from a place of being judgmental or critical, because as we're learning more and more, we have a systemic situation in this country that really influences the way that we view people of color and people of other cultures. But the kids, as we were asking these questions, were like, I think that they live in huts. I think that they, they just dress in really skimpy clothes. And so these images that the kids were giving us, and again, these are images, that kids were giving us in communities all across New York. It was very clear that what they had sort of formulated in their heads was coming from media. It was coming from images. It was coming from movies. And the representation is clearly not accurate, right? Mm-hmm. So then after a couple of weeks of working with Grace, we came back and I interviewed the kids again. And I said, all right, what do you know now about Uganda? It's Kampala's a city. Yes, it is. There are buildings and there are paved roads and people live in houses in Uganda, and people wear jeans in Uganda the same way that we wear jeans. And this all sounds very basic, but in terms of development for children, these are very important distinctions to be making, because these images are shifting in their heads. And if we can get as many kids as we can to shift those images very early in their lives, I think that that's very important work that we need to be doing.
Are you doing this at all through sponsors, or are you the one-woman band that you said you were earlier, and are you basically coming out of pocket for all of this?
Well, some of it for the first few trips was out of pocket, in terms of my travel costs and my living expenses while I was in Uganda. I would say by about our third trip, the programming was paid for by individual sponsors. So what I mean by programming is any supplies that I had for the kids, as I think you guys know, all of the tap shoes have been donated, or people have donated money to buy tap shoes in cases where we needed more tap shoes. During my fourth trip, we hosted a huge show that had 250 kids dance in the show at the end of the 4 weeks. And all of those kids, you know, they got T-shirts. You know, we provided meals for the day. So all of those things have been paid for by sponsors. The program has just recently become a 501c3, nonprofit. So now that that's happened, I do imagine that more of the expenses will go toward, my travel costs, for example. I don't pay myself anything, obviously, to run the program. But we're to a place now where we have a little one at home, and I'm going to have to, I need some help, at least paying for travel costs. We also, one of my big goals moving forward is to bring more tap dancers, so that there's a greater community of people that can be continuing this work all the time, because it's not realistic for it to be just me traveling over there. It needs to be within the greater tap community, and we really need to get more people involved. So my next trip, my plan, and my hope is to be able to employ tap dancers to bring over sort of one tap dancer at a time for a week each, so that I, in a month, I can basically get four new tap dancers, into that community and into that program, so that more people can start to go over there.
I remember the first video that you put out about getting tap shoes. I remember it. It touched my heart so much. And so how did you get started with that process of asking people to donate shoes and donating money to buy shoes? And is there a way that you can tell our audience about how they can help in terms of getting tap shoes for the kids in Uganda?
The fundraising and the getting tap shoes was actually entirely accidental. It wasn't really a conscious thing. What happened was I posted, so I had mentioned earlier that I sent some videos over. This was very early in the process, and the kids were working off of those videos, and that they sent some response videos back, and that was probably the video you saw, right? Was when the kids, were dancing for the first time, and many of them did not have shoes yet. And I posted it, and I can't remember if I said we need to get shoes, or if somebody commented on the video and said, hey, do you need shoes? I actually can't remember what happened, but I do remember that after I posted that, I suddenly was getting these messages over Facebook from people all over the world that were we want to send shoes. Can we donate? And I was I got to organize this somehow, because I can't just be pocketing money, what, how do we do this? So I very quickly got fiscal sponsorship through Fractured Atlas, just so I would be able to funnel money into that account so that it was legitimate and it was accounted for. And then I started, truly to this day, people just send tap shoes to my personal address, and sometimes companies, they'll forget that to contact me, and I get a box from Dancing Fair of donations of tap shoes, which is wonderful, but Capizio has donated, Dancing Fair has donated, Tap Emporium, which is Avi Miller and Ofer Ben, who have provided tap shoes for a lot of Broadway shows. They've donated. They donated 25 pairs, and those shoes are over $300. I was it was really generous and really amazing. So we've had, and of course a ton of personal donors from all around the world. Yeah, you and I've had donors from Australia, from different places in Europe. I was you realize that sending the shoes from Australia is going to be more expensive, right, than just giving money on the website. But I think what's really cool about this is that people have felt they want to be a part of it enough that it's fun for them to think about these shoes that I have in my closet, right, are actually going to go toward, I might see it in one of the videos, right? Especially if they're a cool color, I might see my shoes show up in one of the videos. And I think that's really fun for people. And so for me also, it's created this international community of dancers from all over the world, who have reached out about the program. And that's been really amazing.
What is happening with the program right now? now in regards to the coronavirus?
So the kids are pretty dispersed right now because, in Uganda, sometimes in the children's centers, they have many children under one roof. And so they can't do that because of social distancing. I'm actually not sure right now. I think we're kind of in a weird transition period that maybe the kids might be able to come back to Kampala, but they've been pretty dispersed outside of Kampala in different places. So what we've been doing is I've really taken this time to organize the program administratively. So again, like I said, we just got 501c3 status, which is an enormous process. It took us a full year to do it. So we've just done that. And then we've also been working on a curriculum. I'm working with, in collaboration with some of my colleagues in Uganda, to create a curriculum for residencies for New York public schools that are sort of a compare contrast of Ugandan traditional dances and tap to show the trajectory of that history. To demonstrate, this is the root of tap and this is where it came from. And I'm working with, my Ugandan colleagues on that because they are, they're experts in the traditional dances. And then, Chloe and Maud Arnold from Syncopated Ladies. I don't know if you're familiar with their work, and if you're not, you should look up some of their videos because they're phenomenal students of Debbie Allen. They've done amazing things in their own right, and they very kindly just donated like 50 scholarships for their online tap festival so that the kids could continue to sort of participate in classes. So some really cool things like that sort of continue to happen, even though we're in a very odd place right now with the program and we're kind of waiting, to get back going.
How can people get involved with Tap Uganda, including those who probably some tap dancers are watching us right now and say, oh, I want to go there and teach too and volunteer for that. So how can people get involved with the program? And maybe, there is more specific help needed right now, again, with the coronavirus or all of that, maybe.
Yeah, sure. They can always reach out to me at pam@tapuganda.org. And I'm always, at the very least, I'm always really excited to, to hear from other dancers and to, try to get people involved as much as I can. Like I said, I'm going to be trying to bring tap dancers there in the next couple of years. So probably, not this summer, obviously, but I'm hoping that we're aiming for like an August 2021 trip. That's let's hope, right? And then, donations, they can make donations, financial donations through tapuganda.org. And that's really helpful because, financial donations can help pay for programming for the kids. It can help facilitate residencies here in New York. And it can also pay for tap shoes if we need it. And then, and tap shoes are super helpful. I'm in the middle of moving right now, so we might want to wait a month for the tap shoes. but as soon as I've moved, I will collect those tap shoes and be excited to do that. My entire front entrance hallway right now is boxes of tap shoes. I'm moving into a space that's going to have a little more storage, and the tap shoes are hopefully going to have their own closet. It's going to be a lot better.
Like, no more boxes, please, just for a month.
Yeah, I just need 1 month, to get my life organized, and also, when we're in a normal, not COVID world, generally, I'm connected to people now who are traveling to Uganda, so I can send them with a suitcase of tap shoes. So I also have a stockpile of tap shoes that are in Uganda, because sometimes if the dancers contact me and they say, hey, I want to start teaching a tap class. Well, they don't make tap shoes in Uganda. You can't get tap shoes in Uganda. Usually what I'll do then is go to one of my colleagues and say, hey, Eric wants to teach a tap class. Can you, pull 15 pairs in this general size range and, pass them off to him. So I do keep a stockpile of tap shoes in Uganda for that reason.
But to the average outsider who just raid your house, they're going to think that you and your husband just knocked over a tap shoe factory.
I know. They're like, why are they hoarding tap shoes? It's weird.
How has that work that you've done, but also the things that have come as a result of that work, how has that changed you as a person, and how has it changed you as an artist?
I think as a person, it's just really expanded my my lens in terms of learning how dance can represent and communicate culture. So what I mean by that is, in learning about the traditional dances, and I'm not even going to say like learning the traditional dances because like I'm okay, but like I'm not great at the traditional dances because they're really hard. They're just hard. But in learning about them, what I see is that the traditional dances, in so many ways, embody the stories of Uganda, and they embody the stories of different communities. And sometimes the dances are more literal and they're about something, and sometimes some of the dances are more have to do with certain kinds of ceremonies, like they might be performed at certain times or at certain events of life. What I've really learned is that, as opposed to like Western dance forms where I don't view them that way, these dance forms that I've learned about in Uganda are really like representative of life in Uganda. They're representative of culture and people's experiences and ancestry for thousands of years. And I think that's why it's so special when you see actual Ugandans performing them, and how important it is that it's Ugandans that are teaching them, which is why Tap Uganda tries to bring over people to teach them, because that embodied history is really precious and it should be preserved, right? So I think that I've really learned a lot about that as a person. I think as an artist, it stretched me. Choreographically, and it's also stretched me in terms of being a teacher, because I've had to be very reflective about like, all right, so I taught that class today. Maybe a couple of these things worked. I kind of feel like maybe this didn't work so well. Let's reevaluate and let's figure out like what needs to be better for tomorrow, or what's going to be more effective, or like maybe what the kids are going to have more fun with. I think it's really challenged me to think differently about my teaching and choreography.
So like when you like learned some of their traditional dances for the first time,
yeah,
I mean, I can imagine.
I'm a train wreck, but yeah.
I mean, do you remember like what it was like the first time that you were learning it, and like how different it was for you to be learning? I mean, like some of the steps are the same, but some of them are very different.
I think mostly like, one of the cool reactions, I'll start with the positive first, right? I think one of the really cool reactions was, hey, some of this reminds me of tap dance. And that was like one of the first things that came to my mind, is like, oh, the way that the feet are moving there, or the rhythm, like I'm familiar with that rhythm. That really reminds me of tap. I think the thing that was challenging is, first of all, it's really strenuous. Like when we were rehearsing the traditional dances, first of all, the first time I learned them, it was like, 80 degrees. We were outside, not outside, but like in an area that was pretty much the same temperature as outside. It's hard to keep up, because, there's jumping, there's high legs, there's, knees are up to your chest. There's, you're moving. It's like a full body workout, right? Like you're moving like your arms and legs simultaneously. So in terms of just like being fit enough to do it, that was like a whole nother level of aerobics from like my usual dance training. Sometimes the rhythms trip me up still a little bit, because, to my Western ear, I'm still learning. Right? Like I'm still learning about the rhythms. And I had some experience with clave prior, which is like, are you familiar with clave rhythms? It's like an Afro-Cuban rhythm. So it's like, I remember it by going like, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? I'm fine. So that's, yeah, I think I taught you that probably when you were young. So I had some familiarity with that. I'm probably not even doing it totally correctly. I have colleagues that would be much better at demonstrating that. But knowing that as a baseline, think about the way that we sort of know dance, and like in eights or in fours, right? Like if we're dealing in 4/4 time, take a bar, and instead of the 4/4 time, that's underneath. Right? So instead of just like ba, 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 it's like ga, 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 ga. And suddenly that's sort of the meter that you're working in. It really changes everything. So that part is challenging for me sometimes rhythmically, is just completely understanding musically, what's going on.
The very small things that I know about music is the clave. So I know that dun 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 dun. Yeah, so I know that. And the one thing that I learned was, which when you really think about it, especially when you think of any song, you're like, oh my God. It's like every song has that clave. It doesn't matter if it's rap, rock, country, bluegrass. It's the same clave beat. Even slow jams, the same clave beat. And as far as African dance, you are sweating every single time you come out of a class.
Yeah.
When I took it, like bring that second pair of clothing, because you're about to jump in that as soon as you jump out of those.
Drenched. And and the East African dances have a very specific style from the West African dances. I'm not as trained in the West African dances. The extent of my West African training is basically like taking open classes at Ailey. I don't know that I've taken from someone who's directly from Senegal or one of the countries that is really known for some of their traditional dances. But I think that West African is perhaps what we're more familiar with in the United States in general, because I had never seen, the stuff we're doing in East African, the intricacies. I had never seen that before. And that part, answering your question also, Rachelle, like that's part of what makes it challenging too, right? It's like, this is not familiar. I've never even seen this, so it's very cool.
And speaking of unfamiliar, and you mentioned already that story with the kids who didn't know a thing about Uganda. And none of us three have been in Uganda, and a lot of people who are watching us right now in the United States and in Europe are probably wondering, just like us, what is this country like? And what fascinated you the most when you first visited?
I had a really cool visit the first visit because it was, I was, again, like I mentioned, I was on a study abroad. So I was a bit cocooned, I was in a group of people. And I think that that's a good way to see a country that you're totally unfamiliar with, because it feels a little bit like there's some comfort in that, right? And so I think the first time I was there, I was just observing. It was like, everything was so new. And, even, and I'll talk about the similarities in a second, because there are a lot of similarities. And I don't want to turn this into like an othering situation, because there are so many similarities between the places that we live. But I think that everything from like what the food looks like to I remember one of the things I didn't expect is that there's a huge Chinese presence in Uganda. And so there are lots of Chinese restaurants. You can actually get like sweet and sour chicken, like every night if you want in Uganda. And so that was something that I think I was surprised by. It's a city, Kampala is a city. So, leading into sort of some of the similarities, paved streets, buildings, hotels. I mean, it's a city. There are places where you can get your nails done and your hair done, and it's schools, museums, and not every area of Uganda is like that. But Kampala, which is the capital, is, it's a city. Yeah. I was really being surrounded by the dance and the music. It's amazing. It's really amazing.
What would you say you love the most about Uganda, and what do you miss the most?
Well, I'll start with what I miss the most, and that's the people, that I know there. It's my friends and my students and my colleagues who I haven't seen for a very long time now. It feels like a very long time. And I try to do like phone calls, every couple of months at the very least. And then with a lot of the dancers who I teach, I'm now lucky enough to be in touch with a lot of them, through Facebook or through Instagram, or so I kind of can keep up on their lives that way. And if they want to reach out about teaching or whatever, we can have a conversation. So missing the people for sure. I think what I love is really the same thing, and that's the community there that I've been very lucky to make, friends and people who help with the program, and of course the dancers. It's just it's special. When you're in a room, like you saw that video, when you're in a space, in that outside space, and there's like 25, 30 kids just hitting it. And, people from the community tend to kind of come and watch, there'll be a lot of people from the community that kind of gather as we're doing classes and stuff. I have this memory of one of the nights that we were in final rehearsals in my, I think it was August of 2018. We were rehearsing for a really big show. That was the one with like 250 kids. People from the community all around, all of the kids' dance teachers who are there all the time, like their Ugandan dance teachers, had shown up for this rehearsal. So like all the adults that are like normally in their lives were there. There were like little kids like trying to imitate the tap steps, like little tiny kids, like, you know, underage too. And they were all like trying to, you know, off to the side, trying to imitate the steps. And there were people like sitting up on there's like a brick wall, and there were people like sitting up on the wall, and there were people like on the rooftop next door watching. And I just remember that moment and just feeling like, you know, I wish I could bottle this happiness, because it's just, you kind of community is like, I don't know, I feel like here in the United States, we don't necessarily view community in the same way all the time. The collective there versus like the individualist society here, I really love being a part of that. And so that's been really special, and I miss it quite a bit.
Our guest today is Pam Vlach, dancer, choreographer, dance teacher extraordinaire, and founder of the arts program Tap Uganda. We will be right back.
Who are the dance teachers that influenced you? Let's like your top two.
Well, I'll have to expand it a little bit, because I had some wonderful teachers when I was little, who I think are important to, you know, to acknowledge, because they really gave me the foundation. And Creslin Morris, Polly Weber, Sherry Atwood, and Melanie Heniff were really instrumental when I was little, and I was just learning, you know, at first, and really all the way till I was 17 or 18. So a lot of dance training. When I moved to New York, you know, Barbara Duffy has been really instrumental for me in terms of just learning about being a tap dancer, and learning tap history, and learning about music. Yeah, she's the first one that, you know, that really comes to mind.
And would you say, as far as dancers in general, that like throughout history, that would be the same answer, or?
Ooh, dancers throughout history. I'm really, really inspired by Bill Robinson. I really like, you know, every time I have an opportunity to watch him, I'm really inspired by him. Also, Leon Collins. Whenever I watch him dance on videos, he's just so amazing. You know, the Nicholas brothers are phenomenal. And I would say those are probably the tops. You know, unfortunately, I never had a chance to meet Gregory Hines. You know, he's one that's sort of, you know, one of our contemporary, I think we would consider him a contemporary master. And he passed away before I moved to New York, a few years before I moved to New York. So I didn't get a chance to meet him. And I, you know, of course, I'm extremely inspired by his work. And I wish I would have had a chance to meet him, because everyone I know that knew him talks about how kind he was and how charismatic he was, and just how welcoming and embracing he was of everyone. And I think I would have really enjoyed knowing him.
Yeah, one of my tap teachers after you moved was one of Gregory Hines' proteges, and so it was amazing.
Mark, right?
Yeah, Mark.
Yeah,
so it was amazing getting to, you know, learn Gregory Hines' style. And of course, like, he always talked about how amazing Gregory Hines was, and so I always felt like it was, it always just felt, every time I watched Gregory Hines, I've always felt like, okay, that's something I'm learning. Like, I'm learning a bit.
Yeah.
I'm learning some of his style, and I can only ever hope to be like the pinky, my fingernail as good as him, because phenomenal. I mean, there's so many amazing dancers.
And I had a similar experience because, Barbara was also heavily influenced by Gregory Hines. There's a great video actually of Mark Mendonça and Barbara dancing with Gregory at they're doing at the gala for the president for Bill Clinton.
Yes.
And it's and they were performing a dance that is great. Yeah.
I didn't know that was your teacher dancing with Mark, because I've seen that clip performing for Clinton multiple times. Oh my gosh. Really. And that's another example of dance connecting us and inspiring us.
Yeah. And being a part of the legacy, right?
Yes.
It's like recognizing the responsibility that we have to carry on the work as accurately and as respectfully as we can.
Exactly. I love that. And so, with those influences that you were listing, like your teachers and, like the famous dancers that have inspired your work, what would you say is probably like the number one biggest thing you've learned from them that's inspired you?
I think it's kind of hammered home how important hard work and persistence is. And I've had conversations, since living in New York with a lot of people about that in difficult moments, right? Where I was like, man, like things are not going well, and those moments that we all reach, either as artists or as students, or as, educators. And I've been really lucky, to have amazing mentors who have just said, you know what? We have all been there, and this is part of it, right? This is part of it. This is part of the struggle. And things can really knock you on your butt, like really hard in life. Life's not easy. So I think that I've really learned, from the people that I respect, that they have also had those experiences and how they've overcome those experiences and really continue to move forward. Just keep moving forward, right? That's the lesson, is like, even when you go through something terrible, just try to keep moving forward, even if it's baby steps.
Rachelle once said something about her experience of being your student. And I'll quote, "Pam came in," Rachelle said, "and changed our world with her big smile and enormous capacity to love." That's what your students are saying about you, Pam.
It's very sweet.
What do you think of it? Yeah. And what do you think it is that you are giving your students on top of teaching them to dance that really changes their world? I know it's not.
I think, well, what I can say what I hope I'm doing, and what I hope that I'm doing is giving them a space that's safe, and giving them a space that's where they can be free to be themselves in whatever form that is, that they can be free to express themselves, and that they can be free to allow themselves to develop as dancers, as movers, again, whatever form that takes. It doesn't have to be in a professional capacity. Sometimes we dance because we're learning about ourselves, right? And sometimes dance can teach us about other people too. So whatever that is, learning about themselves, learning about others, if I can help be a conduit for that, I hope that's one of the roles I'm playing.
Thank you so much again, so much for your time. This was so amazing. It was just so educational, and what you're doing is such a beautiful thing. And, we seriously applaud you for it. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun to talk to the three of you.
All right. Have a great weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye.
5, 6, 7, 8.